You know how you sometimes have a dream that's really cool and you think this would make an awesome story, and then you write it down and realize that it's either not as cool as you thought it was in your newly awakened state, potentially it's just super confusing, and or it's nowhere near enough for a story. It's barely a concept after all. Turning a dream into a story can be challenging, but a lot of fun, so let me tell you how I did it. The story I call Rug, Rune of an Unknown God, came to me in a dream. Not the entire story, but the concept, some characters, and the general feel of it. I'm going to tell you what I dreamt, the questions I asked about the dream afterward, and how I answered them to find out if I even had a story idea at all. Obviously I did, but let me tell you how I came to that conclusion. In the dream, there was a small cat demon who met two people on the road, then had some sort of good interaction with them. I don't know if I actually dreamt this part, or if I just in dream knew that it had happened. What I did dream was her overhearing some people planning to kill these two, and she rushed to warn them. On the way, she stumbled over a staff, which she thought belonged to one of the two, and she thought he needed the staff to defend himself, so she took it and continued. She came to a city where these two people had gone, but she couldn't find them on her own and got help from a fox demon who knew the area better. These two people that she was trying to help were in a large cavern where there was a pool of water in the middle, and then on the walls there grew vines. There were people in the pool and climbing on the vines because the floor was dangerous, but so were the pool and the walls. The vines, apart from always shifting so you had to keep moving, sometimes grew thorns and hurt people, and the pool turned either ice cold or boiling hot at irregular intervals. How the floor was dangerous was a bit more unclear, but it was, so these people had to keep moving between the pool, the floor, and the wall to make sure none of these places had time to hurt them. And I got the sense that people were trapped in there. Once you were in, you couldn't just leave. The cat demon eventually made it to this cavern and saw the two people she'd met before, but also saw that the man with the staff still had his staff, so the one she had brought wasn't his. That's about where the dream ended. There was no context or anything, but it was just really cool. I was especially intrigued by the cavern, and I will admit it was a fairly straightforward dream. There was a clear linearity to the event, nothing too fantastical that couldn't be explained by magic, which made it an excellent candidate for being turned into a story. But there were some questions to be answered, and I have asked similar questions of far weirder dreams and found story seeds in those as well. The questions in this instance were, who were these people? What was with the staff? Where were they? What was that large cavern? And why were they there? The last two questions felt extra important because while it was a really cool place, there didn't seem to be a point to it. For it to make sense in a story that anyone would go there, you'd have to be able to gain something from it, not just rush around to avoid danger. So that's where I started, because if I couldn't figure that out, the rest would be irrelevant. Since the place more than the people was what was fascinating to me, I needed the place to make sense first of all. So what could this place be? Obviously, it was magical in some way. In my dream, the two men had gone there freely, but I did consider that maybe it was a prison or some sort of hell or something. You're doomed to forever move around between these three dangerous places. I didn't love that idea though. It felt too easy. So I started wondering, what would make someone want to go to a place like this? What would be so valuable that someone would take this risk for it? Things like material wealth or power felt too simple, but also like something that people would definitely take a lot of risk for. Other things that people might take stupid risk for would be love, or maybe it was something religious. If you could handle that place, you would be blessed by some god or other. With this, I eventually concluded that this was a place where you could go and ask the gods for favors. It could be material wealth, or power, or love, or blessings, or answers to some questions, or anything else you might believe that only a god could help you with. So for a while, my thought was that. You went to this place, endured or avoided the pain as long as possible, and in the end, if you did well enough, your wish would be granted. Problem with that was that it felt a bit boring, and too simple. Could you really be guaranteed that your wish would be granted? Wouldn't that just mean that anyone who was able to go here and go through this thing would be powerful and wealthy, and everyone else would not? What about those who were too poor to come here or had some sort of disability that made them unable to climb the walls or get into or out of the pool and so on? So I needed to change it a bit. I needed it to not be a guarantee that your wish would be granted, and I needed the risk to be larger than just enduring some pain. If pain isn't bad enough to discourage people, what about death? That's a pretty logical next step. Obviously, if there was a risk you'd die by going there, that would be scary. But a question I try to always ask myself when it comes to stakes is, what would be worse? Especially, what would be worse than death? There are many things that would be worse than death for different people, but one thing I think scares most people is your secrets being revealed, or bad things that you've done in the past being brought up for everyone to see. I think most people can relate to at least a few things that you don't want people to find out. Or at least that you don't want a specific person to find out. If nothing else, just how much you hated a Christmas gift you once got from your grandma but didn't have the heart to tell her. So that's what I went with. This place is now a temple where you go if you have a wish or a question or something that only the deity of this temple can help you with. But before you receive that help, your deepest, darkest secrets are revealed and judged. All the things that you feel bad about and all the things that other people were hurt by, even if you didn't know or didn't care. It's revealed to everyone in the temple and to anyone involved in the event in question. So everyone, alive or dead, that you have hurt or lied to will find out. You get a chance to see the situation with clear eyes, apologize or explain yourself, and then you're judged. Not by the deity of the temple, but by the people that you've hurt and the people who are in the temple at that moment. A sort of impartial jury. Based on their judgment, the deity grants or denies your wish. Originally, it was going to be so simple as if you're forgiven by this jury, your wish is granted. If you're not, it's not. And if you're not, you're trapped in this temple until something. I added that because I did want to keep the wall and the pool, although I did remove the pool later, so now it's just the wall. Either way, I thought it was such an important part of why the place felt so cool, so I had to find a reason to keep it. So now it's a punishment if you failed the judgment. This isn't exactly how it works now later in the process, but that's what I got at this initial brainstorm. Going back to the other questions, now that I know what the place was. Who are these people? What's with the staff? And why are they at this temple? By the way, I will have a video up eventually on more world building around the temple, so subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know more about that. Or join my Patreon. The highest tier patron get access to my world anvil for this world, where the information I have on this temple is already available. Anyway, the next question that felt natural to ask once I knew what the temple was about is who these two men were and why they were there. Because a cool place is all well and good, but the characters is what makes an actual story. First of all, in the story I changed it so it's now a man and a woman, because that's how the characters evolved over time. But I needed both of them to have problems large enough that they would risk going to a place like this. And I needed them to feel like they were good enough people or had good enough reasons for all the bad things they'd done to have a chance at being forgiven. Or feel like their problem was large enough that that didn't matter, they just had to try it. And the thing about this is that I thought it had to be something selfless they went there for. Not something for themselves, but for someone else or for some larger purpose. Because if you go to a place like this where all your evil deeds will be laid bare, you're probably not doing it to gain any kind of advantage for yourself, if that makes sense. My thought is that if you want power or riches, you probably also want respect. And if everyone finds out about your deepest, darkest secrets, there's every risk that they will lose respect for you. So I thought of reasons why one would do something like this. It would be to help someone else or help a large number of people. Maybe someone you know is sick and you go there to pray for their recovery. I wanted it to be high stakes, and high stakes is often misunderstood to mean that it has to involve the end of the world or something equally dramatic, but of course it can be much smaller than that. The sick loved one could definitely be very high stakes. That, however, is provided that you know the characters well enough to understand and care about their sick loved one. I was thinking at this point that this scene at the temple would be the beginning of the story, and I wasn't sure I could establish the characters well enough for that to work. And on top of that, or maybe that on top of this, I didn't know the characters well enough for that. The stakes in my stories are usually based on what the first spark of the idea is. If the first spark is a character, the stakes can be very personal, like a sick loved one, because I know the character already. If, on the other hand, my first spark is a concept or a place, like in this case, and I have nothing on the characters, I don't make the first big stake something intensely personal. Personal stuff comes later, once I've gotten to know the characters. And in this case, I also knew that these two people were not the focus of the story. The shapeshifter was the main character, so if anyone needed some personal stakes, it was her. Does that make sense? It does for me. So what I eventually went for is that one of these two people is the king of this land, and she goes to the temple because she knows somehow that she won't be king much longer, and is worried about what will happen to the kingdom then, because there is an outside threat, and the person who will most likely take over after her is likely to allow that threat to turn into a war. Hala, this character, is very against the idea of war and has been working hard to make sure it doesn't come to that. So what she goes to the temple with is a prayer that the country will be safe after she's gone. I figure that that's something that the reader will understand are high stakes, even if they haven't had time to get to know the character and the kingdom yet. Then there's the other person, the man with the staff, who is accompanying Hala to this temple. If you've seen my video on magic in this world, you'll understand that this staff means that he's a Vala, a priest and magician of this world. This is something I came up with early. A staff can only mean so many things, especially if it's something a person might need on them when they're threatened. To me, that means it's a weapon and or something magical, and I went with magical. I had decided that Hala was a king, and by the way, I didn't have their names at this point, but I'm using them now because that makes it less confusing. The person with her could be a friend, a bodyguard, or advisor, for example. I went with friend because going to a place like this, it felt like you'd rather bring a friend than a bodyguard or advisor. But also, this friend, his name is Geller, he needed to have his own reason to be in the temple. Coming with to the city to support his friend, sure, but to go into the temple, there had to be something he wanted from that. I will say it took me a while to figure out his reasons, and so I won't go into that here. That'll come in a later video, potentially in one about how I designed him as a character, because that was a very fascinating process. Stay tuned for that. So, what about the shapeshifter? The main character, as I knew from the beginning that she was. How did I know that? Well, she was the one the dream followed. She was the biggest mystery. She seemed to have the biggest stakes. I didn't know what stakes, but that's how it felt. And she was clearly a good person, just based on the fact that she tried to bring the staff to a stranger, knowing that there were bad people also heading in that direction. The main character doesn't have to be a good person, I want to point out, but in my stories they are usually, at least, mostly good. And having figured out that Hala was a king, I didn't want her to be the main character. I'm tired of writing about royalty. So this shapeshifter, her name is Elva, was a young child who was alone without a family. I had two thoughts as to why she could be alone. Either her family was dead, or they had tossed her out for some reason. At the time, I didn't consider that maybe she was just literally lost, or that it could be natural for a shapeshifter her age to be on her own. I decided that her family was dead, and she was looking for a new family, which was why she sort of attached herself to Hala and Geller. At this point, there were two questions to ask before I spent any more time on this dream. Is this a story idea? And what about the fox demon? First, yes, this is a story idea. It's not a plot, but it's an idea worthy of plotting. I have three characters. I know at least a little bit about who they are. I have a location. I know the purpose of it, and I know what the characters are doing there. I have some stakes, the threat of war and Ilva's personal stakes of finding somewhere to belong. This is an excellent place to start. And the fox demon, he didn't get to be part of the story because he was stolen. He was Shippo, a character from the anime series Inuyasha, which I was watching at the time. A lot of other things in the dream were inspired by Inuyasha too. The staff in the dream looked like the staff Miroku carries. He's a Buddhist monk in the series. The architecture of clothing was also very feudal Japan, which is the area that Inuyasha takes place in. At this point, therefore, I also thought that the story would take place in a fantasy world more inspired by feudal Japan than anything else. That has since changed, and I'm going to talk about why and how that changed in another video. In another other video, I'm going to talk about how I went from this idea to creating an actual plot, and more on the characters, and more on the entire process of the story. There are many videos coming up, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, YouTube would like to keep you occupied with this video. This is another option, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, be safe, I will see you next time.